Good evening and welcome back to Capitol Tonight, a statewide look at politics. I'm Tim Boyd. U.S. Senator Richard Burr spent last week traveling the state, had a chance on Friday to sit down with Time Warner Cable News managing editor Sean Flynn in Charlotte. They talked about Congress, his health care proposal, and more. Here's that interview.
All right, thank you, Tim. Senator Richard Burr, thanks for joining us for this conversation. You sit on the Select Committee on Intelligence. Lots of news there right now, especially with the chairman making accusations against the CIA on spying on committee members. What's your take on it? Are you still trying to figure out what's going on there, or do you feel like the CIA did in fact look into you all?
Well, let me say that there are not many facts out in public. There's a lot of accusations, but they're not backed up with fact. If in fact the CIA breached the agreement that we had as it related to this system that they set up for us, then they're going to be held responsible for it. If in fact staff on the Intelligence Committee accessed documents that they didn't have access to, remove those documents from the facility against what the agreement said, then they ought to be held responsible. But I don't want to point fingers now because we don't know. And I think Senator Reid announced that we're going to have the Sergeant-at-Arms from the United States Senate do a forensic investigation on the computer system. And we'll have a third party tell us who did what and when. Just on the surface, though, if the CIA had gone into the Senate committee's computers, the least the director should have done is to notify the chairman and the vice chairman. That didn't happen. That was a huge mistake. If staff did access information and take it out, that's a serious breach of protected documents, and they ought to be held responsible as well.
Of course, all this comes after the Eric Snowden incident last year, and America's pretty much on edge with thinking that everybody's being spied on all the time. If they're being spied on, you all are being potentially spied on, if indeed that is the case. I mean, how do you reassure the public that we're not constantly being looked at?
That as a member of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee, I'm the one that's responsible to certify that the entire intelligence community lives within the letter of the law, and they don't breach the confidentiality and the privacy of the American people, whether that's by executive order or without it, because the executive order can't allow that to happen. And I can tell you today that I'm firmly convinced that everything that's been done in the past lived within the letter of the law or the letter of an executive order, and that the committee's responsibility is in the future to make sure that happens. It's not to say that we can't look back and say there's some things we shouldn't have done. There were some things we shouldn't have done. But the question was, were they legal? That was decided by the Justice Department a couple of years ago when they looked at it. So I'm not sure that there's anything in the report that is at the root of this whole issue with the CIA, except that some would like it to be public, 6,300 pages. And from a fundamental standpoint, there are parts of the report that are mischaracterizations and some that are unfactual. And the exchange that's happened not only between Republicans on the committee and Democrats, but between the CIA and the report and the Obama White House and the report is the inaccuracies in the report that they would like to get fixed.
The report you're talking about is on the interrogation report.
The interrogation and retention.
So I imagine you've read it.
I have.
And is there things in there that are concerning to you, other than you're talking about things that are erroneous in there?
There are things that are erroneous. There are things in there that concern me. But none of the things that are pointed out in there breach the law or breach the powers that they were given by Executive Order 12333. And I think it's important that we understand that. So I want those who performed these acts to understand they're not liable. The Justice Department has already said that. But it's important, I think, that we once again contain what goes on in the Intelligence Committee confidentially in the Intelligence Committee. Our committee is set up to assure our members and the public that they live by the law. Anything that we discuss is usually secret or sensitive, and for that reason, there shouldn't be a public discussion about it.
All right, you're going to tell me a little bit later after some of the secrets are explained. Moving on to another hot topic is the Affordable Care Act. We're a week away from the deadline. How do you think it's coming along? Obviously, you've been a critic of it. But we're seeing more polls that most Americans don't like it, but they just want to change it as opposed to just starting over.
Yeah.
Where are you at this point? Because it seems like we're pretty far down the road.
Well, let me say I have been an outspoken critic, but I've also offered an alternative. And I think you have a right to be as critical as you want to be if you're willing to lay your cards on the table. I've done that with Senator Tom Coburn and Orrin Hatch. From a standpoint of the act itself, the White House is out now in mid-March with a few days left, trumpeting 5 million people signed up. That's about 3.8 on Medicaid and 1.2 on the exchange. Now, out of those individuals on the exchange, we're learning that many of them are pregnant women, and many of them are individuals that are extremely sick. It means that the premium cost escalation next year is going to be bigger than it was going into this. And most Americans have expressed their concerns about the affordability of health care under this plan. And it's not limited to the exchange. It's permeating for the first time the corporate plans that are out there and the individual plans that we might purchase as Americans. So if health care is not affordable, then you don't have health care. And I think the CBO even studied that there are going to be more people uninsured with the Affordable Care Act than there were prior to it, and that's what the attempt was, to try to close that gap. Here's the facts, though. Today, with 1.2 million people in the exchange, 6.7 million people got a letter from their insurer nationally that they had lost their insurance. Now, the president extended their ability to stay on it. But if you look at it from a net-net, over 5 million people have been notified that their insurance is going to be gone because it doesn't meet what the federal government they should have. That's not what we were sold. It's not what the American people want. But this president has been unwilling up to this point to adjust, even tweak the law.
The ACA is obviously going to be a hot topic in the upcoming Senate race, not yours. Your Democratic partner, Kay Hagan's obviously up for re-election. What do you think of the campaign so far? We've already had millions of dollars coming in on both sides, criticizing Senator Hagan, criticizing the Republicans' top candidate. What do you think of it?
Listen, I've never complained when somebody criticized me about my vote. Hopefully I've voted in a way that I one, can sleep at night, and two, that I can sell to the public why I did what I did. Any concerns that exist, whether it's with Senator Hagan or any other senators, they should have thought about that when they voted for it. It's a little late to go back and say, oops, because as a policymaker, I've got to figure out how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again if this fails, and I think it will. I think it's unaffordable, but I think it's unworkable. And the question is, how much damage do we do in the meantime? How many community hospitals go out of business that will never have an opportunity to reopen? How many pharmaceutical, biologic, and device companies leave the United States because we're no longer the place to innovate because they can't recover? How many med students choose not to go to med school because a $250,000 loan doesn't cover what they're being reimbursed? These are all things that we have to reconstruct after the fact that we should be concerned with now.
At this point, have you endorsed any of the candidates?
I have not. I've said publicly that I think that Tom Tillis is the best candidate for the general election, but I historically have tried to stay out of primaries, and will stay out of this one till the end.
Real quick, there's been some rumblings that you may not run for re-election in 2 years. Can you give us some insight into what you're thinking at this point?
My plans are to run. I think most of the rumblings come from that would like to have this Senate seat. 3 years is eternity in politics, and I'm still, by Senate standards, a young member of the United States Senate, so it's my intentions to run. But I also believe that generational change is an important aspect, and I'll weigh it after we get through this next election as to what value I have in the United States Senate for North Carolina.
All right. Senator Richard Burr, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
All right, we got to take one last short break, but when we return, our Reporter Roundtable gets us up to speed on the stories of the week. Stay with us.